In this video, we're going to work with our locations to populate our location list detail view, and we're going to write some code to convert our CKAsset to an actual image. Okay, so back in Xcode, let's go to our location list view. And you can see the first thing we have here is this array of locations that holds our mock data, and that's what we're populating our list from. Well, this is what we're going to replace with our location manager. So let's go ahead and delete this environment object, and again, private var location manager, and that is of type location manager. So now these locations, that we just deleted is now location manager dot locations, right? Just pulling from that array. So we essentially just swapped out what array of locations we're using, right? Got rid of our mock data, added our environment object location manager that holds of all of our locations. So that wraps it up for this screen. Pretty simple, but let's go to our location cell to double check and make sure we don't need anything here, right? So we're just passing in a location that we get from that array. This image is what we're going to fix when we do our CKAsset stuff. Location.name. Okay, this looks all good. You see we're still using our mock data. If we did want to open up our preview here and show the canvas, wow, it always opens up so huge. So we can still, tweak and change our cell UI because we're using the mock data down there. So the mock data still has some use, even though we're replacing things with the real stuff. So if I go to location list view again, now that we have the real data, let's actually run the app, and I'll walk through what's going to happen here, right? So as soon as this screen loads, it's going to download the locations. There you go, showing the map pin. But now on our locations tab, if I click on it, we already have the data. We don't have to make another network call, right? We made the network call here on the map screen to get everything we needed, and now we can just kind of pass the data around to make the app nice and snappy. So that's another reason why I wanted to put it in the environment so all screens have access to it. So I'm not constantly making network calls, because you'll see later on throughout the app, we're going to be making a lot of calls to CloudKit. So anything we can do to make that more efficient is going to be helpful. But look, our list of locations is good. Well, at least for now, but we have the real names and the amount. And here you can see that minimum scale factor in action on Peggy Sue's Diner, right? It's a little smaller font because it's shrinking it down to 75% before it truncates it. So now if we click on let's go to AC Kitchen and Lounge in the detail view. Okay, see we passed in the name. Now we're getting the actual address, the actual location that we downloaded from the network. Okay, we didn't do anything with location. We didn't do anything with phone. We don't have anything with check-in. We do have something with website. Remember, we replaced that. So yep, this takes us to the URL that we downloaded, AC Hotel San Jose. So it's starting to come together. It's starting to work a little bit. Of course, this user's checked in. We'll do later because this is a little more complex. It's not as simple as just passing in users. We got to make another query to get the users checked in here. But again, this is what I'm talking about with the CGI layers, right? We're still on the lower layers. We're going to come back and keep adding layers to this. And that's how development really goes. If I were to sit here and teach and build our entire final detail list view, just line by line, copying my completed beta project, well, that's not really teaching you how development works. Again, it's like sculpting. You're just slowly chipping away, slowly sculpting away at this thing. So hopefully you're getting an insight into that, right? You don't just have the final code and then type out the final code, piece by piece. Okay, so our detail screen is working, but let's go to the location detail view, and yeah, there it is. Make sure we're not missing anything. Again, the banner image is what we're going to fix in a little bit. But again, because we a couple videos ago, passed in a location and stopped using, the hard-coded data, this is what I was talking about, how, once we get our real data, all we essentially have to do is pass in the real data and we're all set up for it. So that's good to go. However, let's handle this image now, right? Because we are still hard coding this placeholder image. Let's actually convert our CKAsset into an image so we can use it in our app. And this takes a couple steps. Okay, let's stop running the simulator, minimize this. The first step takes place in our constants file. So another quick note about constants is in a larger app, you have to be really careful that this file doesn't get out of control. This app is relatively small, so we're only gonna have a couple things in here, so it's fine. But again, as your app grows, use your judgment. If it starts to get out of hand, create some new files, some better organization techniques. But I wanna give the warning that I've had plenty of constants files that got pretty crazy, but gotta fix that. Okay, so the first thing we wanna do is have our placeholder images. So I'm gonna do enum placeholder image, and just a couple of static lets here, static let avatar equal. And here we're going to create a UIImage from this because you're going to see our images in Swift UI are going to take in a UI image, and you'll see why in a second. Oh, I do need some UI kit action here. There we go. And then it's going to be named, right? And then we want to pass in the string. And if you remember, if I go to our assets folder here, avatar is just like default avatar, default banner asset, default square asset. These are what we're going to kind of put in this constant, so we have easy access to them, right? So we don't have to constantly keep typing out this string. I can just type placeholder image.avatar and I have it. So I'm going to copy, paste, because again, we need that square asset. So I'm going to do placeholder, just call it square, and then just call it banner. It may or may not be, so that lines up nicely. I don't know. I wouldn't do that, would I? And then we'll call this default square-asset. I think that's what I called it, if I remember correctly. Yes. And you know what? I always do this just to be safe. Copy, constants. Let's just paste it in there. I think it's the same, but you never know. Do that again with the banner asset. Safety first. Constants, banner asset. There we go. So now I have easy access to my placeholder images because we're going to use these in our extension here. And then the next thing I want is something called image dimension. Image dimension. And you're going to see this is an enum because it's going to have two cases, right? We have a square case and a banner case. And the reason I'm creating this, as you'll see, we're going to use this a lot, and we're going to determine our images based on like what dimension we pass in. Like a lot of our stuff will take in an image dimension because we either want the square or the banner. So this is how we differentiate that. And then here we're going to also have a helper function called get placeholder. And then for dimension, that does take in an image dimension. And then again, this is just a helper function to give us the placeholder for either the square or the banner. So there's two ways to write this real quick. So a quick way, because we only have two of them, would be, this returns a UI image. I forgot about that. UI image. And then now we could do, return, dimension equals dot square. If that's the case, ternary operator here, we want to return placeholder image dot square. And then if it's false, we want to return placeholder image dot banner. Oh, and it's telling me, cannot convert an optional to an actual UI image. It's because I need to force unwrap these here. Force unwrapping, oh no. And this is because these are in my bundle. I know they exist. Of course, this would break and crash if somebody went into our bundle and deleted it. But this is where the nuance comes in, of course, right? So on an app that you're building by yourself, or maybe you're on a small team, it's probably a lot safer to do. However, if you're on an app that has 20 developers and they don't know what's what and they accidentally delete an image, maybe you do want to be a little more careful with this. However, I'm going to force unwrap that for now. So this is one way you could write this. However, this makes it not flexible to extend. And I'm not saying you have to make everything flexible to extend. I know that's a common thing. I like to pick my battles. So this is something that I think is a good example that could easily extend, meaning like, yeah, we have a square and a banner image, but as we add new screens, new features to the app, like could we have, more of a 16:9 like thumbnail image, or maybe we could have like a vertical screen that had a vertical image. So you can see we could have multiple image dimensions. So because I think this is so easily extendable, or the possibility to extend it is likely, I don't want to write it like this because this ternary operator is only going to work if you have two options. So what I'm going to do, and this is really just, as an example to show you kind of how to think about some things and make them extendable. So I'm going to switch off dimension and then get rid of this. Let Xcode yell at me. So lazy. Yep, give me my cases. So I have square and banner. So here I want to return placeholder image dot square, and down here I want to return placeholder image dot banner. And then again, like I said, if we did add a vertical case, now you can see I would just have a case dot vertical, return placeholder dot vertical, right? So this is an example of something that could easily be extended, whereas if you use that ternary operator, you're kind of stuck into just two options. So, just a little side lesson I wanted to put out there. Okay, so we have our placeholder images and we have our image dimension enum, which you'll see gets used quite a bit. So now in our extensions folder, now let's actually create the extension on CKAsset so we can easily convert this. So new Swift file, call it CKAsset plus ext, create. And then of course import CloudKit. We are going to have to import UI because we're going to be dealing with UI image. UI kit, not just import UI. Extension, CKAsset, And here we're going to create a function that convert to UIImage in. We want to specify the dimension because if we image dimension, let me finish typing this out before I explain, before I type something dumb. UIImage. Okay, so the reason we want a dimension is there's multiple places where this conversion can fail. So if it does fail, we want to return the placeholder. And this is how we're going to determine, do I get the square placeholder or the banner image placeholder? So let's create that first. Say let placeholder equals image dimension dot get placeholder for dimension that we passed in. Right, this is why we created that function. So whatever dimension we pass in when we use this, give me that placeholder for that dimension. Okay, so now like I mentioned, the conversion can fail. So let's talk about the process of what we're doing. So essentially CKAsset is data, but it's at a file URL in our app. So we have to go to that file URL, get that data, convert that data into a UI image. Those are the steps we're going to take. So where this could fail is file URL is an optional, so that could fail. And then creating an image from data, returns an optional because that can fail. So that's why we have this placeholder here to return that placeholder in case things go wrong. So let's make sure we have that file URL. So we'll do guard let file URL equal self, because self is the CKAsset. You see we have file URL right here, self.file URL else. And then, so basically, if this is nil, like if we don't have the file URL for some reason, we'll return the placeholder that we created up here. And again, placeholder knows to be square or banner based on the dimension we passed in. Okay, Xcode's yelling at me. I'm not sure why. Let me finish typing this out and we will come back and see what's up. So now that we have our file URL, which is data, we want to create an UI image from that data. So that's we'll do a do try catch here. So do, and we'll say let data equals data, and we'll initialize that with a contents of a file URL. So here's contents of, you see it throws, that's why we're doing the do try catch. So we need a URL. Well, we have the file URL that we just checked for up above right here. So basically the way the do try catch works, if you're not familiar, it's going to try this. Well, I got to actually mark it try. Forgot to do that. And then if it fails, it's going to go into the catch. So basically, if I can't get data from this file URL, I want to return our placeholder, again, that we created up there. But if I do get data from this file, like if this try works, now I can use this data, and then I want to return UI image, and then you can see an initializer from UI image takes in data, which again, I can use the data we just got back up here on line 18. But UI image, anytime you're creating a UI image from something, that itself returns an optional, because again, something could go wrong converting that data. So we're going to nil coalesce that. So if that does return nil, again, we just want our placeholder that we created up here on 13. Okay, so now let's see what I messed up, because Xcode does not like this at all. So I think I messed up something silly somewhere. Okay, I found it, but I also found a typo here. I need to say convert to UI image. Forgot a little T there. But basically this image dimension .get placeholder needs to be a static function, right? In order to be able to call it just image dimension .get, like I need to make this static. So basically static means, let me go back to our constants here. So this function, this get placeholder function needs to be static. So if you're not familiar with static, I'll put a link to a video all about that. But essentially that means every image dimension has this static function, meaning I don't have to like initialize an image dimension in order to get access to the function. I can just call image dimension .get placeholder and we're good to go. Okay, so now back to our CKAsset plus extension. Should, question mark, oh my gosh. Oh, missing, okay. So let me just do this because it obviously didn't autocomplete before. So .get placeholder for dimension. There we go. I always like to do the autocomplete, not just like edit it. Okay, and down here, Xcode is struggling. So what I think happened is I picked the wrong file URL. So let's try writing this again and I'll explain what I think I did, hopefully. Try data, you can see contents of, okay, right? And it throws. So I think the URL, when I did file URL, right, and I picked one, so you see there's two of them, but one has a V next to it, one has an L next to it. So I think I picked the V because this is kind of a naming thing. You see self.file URL and it's blue. That means our CKAsset has like a built-in system property called file URL. And by naming it the same thing, I need to make sure I pick the right one, which is going to be our local one, which is what we created here, because this variable here is still an optional, as you can see right here. So this is something, well, obviously too, the casing of the URL is different, but this is something you need to be careful with if you're naming things the same. So maybe you can just name it a little differently to completely avoid that. That's up to you. But make sure you use the local one that's not an optional, and that should clear everything up. So yeah, so again, I like to leave these mistakes in there just to show that like everyone makes them, and then also, you know, some maybe gotchas that you ran into. So those are the mistakes I made. No problem. Xcode will yell at you loud and clear for you to fix it. All right, so admittedly, that was a little choppy. There were some mistakes. Again, I think the mistakes are good learning lessons. So let me go back and review it. So hopefully it'll kind of make sense to what we did. Okay, so the first thing we did again was create our placeholder image enum. And again, that's just for easy access. So we don't have to constantly type this out like every time. We created an enum called image dimension. That way we can use this as a type. So we can pass in .square.banner when we need the proper image. And then we have a static function there that basically just gives us the right placeholder, right? Because sometimes we need the square placeholder, sometimes we need the banner placeholder. That's all this function is doing, is giving us the right placeholder for us to use here in the CKAsset, right? Where we have convert to UIImage, where we pass in the dimension. And again, the only reason we're passing in the dimension is so we know what placeholder to get back, because our CKAsset knows its dimension. Like, we're not telling the CKAsset or the image to be a square or a banner. It already knows that. The only reason we have a dimension is so we can get back the proper placeholder, which again, we created here because we use that placeholder where this can fail. So like I said, every CKAsset is data at a file URL. So we use this guardlet to unwrap this optional to make sure, you know, there is something in this file URL. And then here in our do try catch, we try creating data from the contents of that file URL, which again is our CKAsset. So we convert that to data. And again, that can fail. That's why it's marked try. So if this fails, we return our placeholder. And again, we know if it's a square or a banner because of this function right here. And then cool, if we get good data, now we can try and use that data to create a UI image from, but that can fail too. So if that does fail, again, return our placeholder. So that is our extension on CKAsset. We got a couple more functions to write on our DDG location object, and then we can actually use this and test it. So let me show you why we need these two extra functions. If I go to our location cell, right, with this image, okay, well, this location does have an asset on it. Well, and we did write an extension on CKAsset to return an image. So you might think we can just do image, and this is what I'm talking about, the initializer. Right before we were just doing name. Sometimes we've done system name. Well, you'll look, there's also a UI image one. That's why we created a UI image. And then now I can just pass in location dot asset or square, or yeah, this would be the square asset dot convert to UI image in, you know, dot square. That's what we want. This may look okay. However, one thing that's not great to handle here is what happens if our CKAsset comes back nil from the server? Well, this isn't going to work. So we need to handle that nil case if it comes back from the server. And we're going to do that on our DDG location object, mainly because it makes this call site cleaner, right? This call site of image, like even this isn't so bad, but even this is a little messy. We're going to make this a lot neater. And again, back to Sean's development philosophy, I always like to make my call sites, which is like where you actually use your functions, as neat and easily readable as possible. That way the reader of the code or even somebody trying to build with it, it's very easy and understandable at the call site. And I think that's better. So we're going to kind of hide some implementation on our DDG location here. All right, so we're going to create these two functions, right? So we'll call it func create square image. And I have a little challenge for you after I type this out here. So create square image. That returns a UI image. Well, I don't have it, right? So I need to import UI kit, Command B. Yeah, anytime you're not getting autocomplete, you may not have imported the right thing. So that returns the UI image. So the first thing I want to do is guard to make sure I have square asset, right? Because again, that can be nil coming back from the server. So guard let asset equal square asset else. And we will return placeholder image dot square. So basically, if it's nil, return the placeholder square image. Cool. So now that we know we have our asset, it's not nil. Now we can return asset dot convert to UI image in dot square. Okay, now let's write our banner one, which is going to be copy paste. And this is where the challenge comes in a little bit. Again, let me finish typing it out, and I'm curious what you all come up with. So now let asset, instead of square asset, is banner. Again, we're just doing the same thing we did, except now this is returning banner, and then asset convert to UIImage in dot banner, right? So basically, anytime we need a square asset, we're going to call location dot create square image, and then anytime we need a banner, location dot create banner image. Now, you may be thinking these are very similar. Maybe you can refactor this. Maybe it's a generic. I don't know. And one thing about this is, dry, don't repeat yourself. Yes, great rule, but you shouldn't always follow it absolutely. There are certainly cases where repeating yourself a little bit makes your code easier to use and easier to read. And I think this is one of these cases. I'm happy to be wrong though. So this is the challenge that I'm going to issue you. See if you can refactor this to, be simpler and more elegant code. So I'm curious what you come up with refactoring these two functions, or maybe even refactoring this whole process. Maybe you come up with a different way than I do. So I would love to hear that in the comments, and I think that will lead to great discussion. But the other thing that your refactor should do as well is, again, I'm a big fan of making the call site clean. I will sacrifice a little bit of dry code to make my call site clean, easy to use, very readable. So let's talk about that call site. Back to the location cell. So instead of having, location.squareAsset.convert to image square, which this doesn't handle the nil case, here we just have location.create square image, right? In this create square image, this will handle if it's nil, if it's not nil, right? If it's not nil, we actually get the image. If it's nil, we get the placeholder. So again, my call site, I believe, nice, neat, easy to use. Okay, so now location list view. Same thing, location cell. That's where we just were, all confused. Location detail view. Now our banner image, this is a completely separate view here. So let's go down to banner image. So now we don't want image name. Remember, that's where we were just hard coding it. Let's just call this image, and it's going to return a UI image. And again, an image initializer doesn't take a name. We want the image initializer to take in a UI image, and that is the image that we pass in. So now we've redone our, what is happening? Okay, I did not capitalize the I in UIImage. That is a mistake I make often. Okay, cool. So now our banner image is good. Scroll up to here. And again, like I said, I just like to completely rewrite the line and get the autocomplete, right? And you see it return, takes in a UI image. So now I just do location dot create banner image. Again, nice and clean there. So let's test these images to make sure we're getting them. Okay, here's our map with the location markers. Go to locations. Cool, now we have the images. Nice, app's starting to come together. Let's click on Original Joe's. There's Original Joe's banner image. Nice, all right, we're starting to come together here. And the nice thing about CloudKit and working with the CKAsset like that is, normally when you're working with like a normal REST API, right, your image that you get back, you're usually just getting like an image URL. And then in every one of your cells, you have to go out and download the image. Of course, you can cache them, so you don't have to do it every time. But this is nice because you're not kind of downloading every avatar image. You're getting that in the beginning in the form of a CKAsset, and the whole image stuff is just converting from a CKAsset to an image. So I like that. But anyway, here we are. We're working with our locations, real data now, real images, looking good. We still got more to go. Again, we got layers. But in the next video, I'm going to help you with some simulator setup, because we're going to have to be logged into our iCloud account on the simulator when we start creating our profiles. And then I'm going to show you how you can put your simulator in like any location in the world, right? Because in the next couple of videos, we're about to start learning core location and showing the user's location on the screen. Well, if you just did that with your location, you're all over the world, right? You're not in San Jose. So we need to make our simulator be in San Jose, and that's what we're going to set up in the next video.